I think Carol was sticking around because item I, she has some experience with residency, and council wanted to discuss that tonight. And she was going to stick around for that discussion and then be done.
Okay, so should we put that up first?
I'm sorry.
She also stick around for this purchasing policy.
Okay. So if we can put purchasing and then do I.
Okay, so resolution 2015-35, amending the city-specific purchasing policy. Okay.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Before we get started, I'll just ask, I appreciate your patience. I know it's been a long night, and this gets a little bit of administrative detail. I'll try to keep it at a high summary level. So coming around is a summary sheet that addresses some of the highlights of the changes that are proposed to the policy. There's also a few available of this summary sheet for the audience as well. Well, as we get started here, and I'll walk you through this, I hope very succinctly, but I do want to let you know that a couple months ago, this was a process that I've discussed in concept with the Public Works Committee, that the idea that is presented here, that granting staff and clarifying staff authority, signing authority, contract authority, change order, contract amendment was brought up in theory at the Public Works Committee, and also that was something that I was interested in working on. And over the last 2 months, I've been working with the city attorney very closely to update the city's purchasing policy. So getting started on that, some of the highlights of the changes and why we're doing this, one of the first reasons is that there was changes in state law. And so for some of the public works bid limits, they have changed. And you can see for the single craft type of trade, like if you were an electrician or a carpenter, and that was the single trade that we were wanting to have performed, that the amount of the bid limits has gone up from $30,000 to $40,000. Similarly, for multiple trades, when you have different tradesmen involved, that dollar amount has gone up as well. And then additionally at the state level, the overall small works roster for smaller public works projects has gone up from $200,000 to $300,000. So that was one of the overlaying background elements. Another element is over the course of the last couple of years, the Municipal Research Services Center has been providing a new services that's been proven very valuable to cities and special purpose districts and other local agencies in the sense that they are maintaining a small works roster where people who procure goods and services as well as professional and personal services and public works projects, they can put their firm's information on one site, and then agencies can use that as a one-stop shopping, and we meet the bid requirements that are mandated in state law. So that provides a very good option for agencies to use. It doesn't negate the fact that if we choose to go out and bid for a service, we can continue to do that as an agency. But it does provide another tool for us to use. And then, of course, some of the changes that were presented, it started with the base line where we began with the current purchasing policy and procurement policy, and then it was updated in format. Presenting some of the tabular information is an update over the last resolution and procurement policy. There were some additional language changes in there as well, some formatting, a little additional, just cleaning up of some of the language for some clarity as well. But one of the big changes that I want to present tonight is some of the dollar amounts that were different from the current policy as well as what we're proposing to go forward. So if you look at the third table on that first sheet, and this is for general purchases of goods. The current dollar levels for buying goods or services like supplies, gravel, water meters, things like that, is up to $15,000. And in the current resolution, it says department heads have authority to award, but it doesn't clearly say that we have the ability to sign and complete that contract agreement to execute and actually make the purchase. It currently comes to council for that final step. So moving to the right-hand side of that table, proposing to change that dollar amount to $10,000 and reduce it, but then give the department head the authority to complete that transaction in its entirety. And then further in the details of the policy, then a report would be generated on a monthly basis that would come forward to council to just show that we have concluded that type of transaction. And for the transactions that I'm speaking to, these are only those transactions that have been adopted in the annual budget. So it wouldn't be outside of the annual budget. And if something came up where a vehicle was wrecked or a pump failed and we had to go through that process, that's outside the budget and it would be brought before council. So I'll move a little bit quicker here, but you can see the dollar amount for the mayor was up to $40,000. But again, the award authority was a little unclear in the language. So moving to the right-hand table, we want to reduce that and provide the city administrator signing authority as well, but at a level of $25,000. And then finally, the difference from the current resolution or current policy is if it was anything greater than $40,000 would come before council, and we're proposing to limit that out at $25,000. So anything above that threshold would come before council. Now, before I move to the next table, I will also share that that same logic applies for the other categories that we will talk about, except for one, and then that's on the back page, and I'll cover that here in a moment. So the next table down covers your professional and personal services. And again, I won't walk through everything like I just did, but the same logic applies. You see the current dollar values on the left-hand side of the table and the proposed values on the right. And then moving down to the next table is the Public Works project, same sort of logic. And part of the thinking behind this is when you have a set value that carries through the different categories of services and goods, services, or projects, it certainly makes it more efficient and easy for staff to keep track of the different requirements that we find ourselves under when we have to acquire these services or contract. Now, one of the things that was absent in the last purchasing policy is covered on the back page. And this is contract amendments and change orders. So the first one, you can see when you follow the chart here, is that under the current policy, staff up to the mayor doesn't have authority to enter into contract amendments. And so what we're proposing is to allow some authority to do that. So just to be clear on what that would look like, so a department head reading this table, 10% of contract value up to $100,000, but no greater than $10,000. To simplify that, if we had a professional services contract, let's say we were doing a rate study for water and looking at water rates, and it was a $250,000 rate study. Well, the maximum dollar value that a department head could negotiate a contract amendment is capped at $10,000. So you can get a sense of how that would apply. Using that same logic, the city administrator and mayor would have a cap value of $25,000, but using that $250,000 threshold for contract. So $500,000 contract, it would only be capped out at $25,000. So then moving on into the change orders, and this primarily applies to the public works projects and the small works roster projects. The dollar value is a little bit larger, and the logic or the thinking behind that is these are typically bigger projects and bigger expenditures and have been identified clearly in the budget. And so it's much more familiar that when we do have changes in these type of projects, they are of an order of magnitude that's a little bit larger. So that's the one change in the dollar values between the different categories. I'll stop at this point, and what I will do is, I know it's been a long night, and we have a week between now and Monday night, that if, as you think of this, and if there are questions that occur that don't come up tonight, I'll make myself available to answer any questions you have, online, offline, between now and next Monday night if this comes up. But if there are specific questions that you'd like to ask at this point, I'd be happy to entertain them, or actually offer our city attorney a chance to speak to anything else that she would like to emphasize.
I just have a real quick one.
Yeah.
In here, under the purpose of doing this policy, you've got the policies established in order to reduce costs. Can you give me a quick example of how it would reduce costs?
One easy example is the administrative cost to bring every contract before the city council for approval. There's a tremendous amount of staff time that goes into preparing that. It does take the council time on your agenda to work through that. And the delay between when you complete a contract and you start the work, you can actually get the service done quicker, so you get the efficiency of that. And that oftentimes when vendors know that the city has some of this authority, you can get a little bit better pricing too.
Thank you.
Other questions from council? Councilmember Steyer?
Looking at this here, it shows where we're purchases up to $100 without a purchase order, and up to purchase order to $1,000 without a purchase order. I mean, we went through this a long time back of purchases being made without purchase orders, and we had a real donkey look at it. I don't see. I mean, I think all purchases need to have a purchase order attached to them. You know, they need something, go to McLennan and go and get it or whatever, but then fill a PO out, and so the payable clerk has a purchase order to tie into the billing of the invoice when they get it to pay.
Thank you, Councilmember Steiger. That's a good point that I neglected to mention. The current policy is, and this was part of the last purchasing policy, that staff can go to McLennan, as an example, pick up a small amount of material where there's an immediate need, up to $100 without a purchase order. But it is subject to department head approval before they go make that procurement. We are proposing to extend that amount from $100 to $1,000, and the same thinking applies, is to spend the staff time when we have a budget already assigned for materials and the supplies that we need to do the work, that we felt it was reasonable to increase the amount from $100 to $1,000. Now, of course, that's the point of tonight, is to take that feedback and get council's comments and concerns. If there's a different dollar threshold that is more comfortable with council, we're certainly here to listen at the staff level as well.
Councilmember Young?
As far as department head control, records, basically, because I think that's what we're getting at. They're under a couple of previous administrations, we got to a point where we were losing track of what was being paid for and controlled by who, and people were signing their own POs and stuff like that. So that's the concern I think we've got, is administrative head, who's going to keep track of, you know, the agreement, you know, I give you authorization to spend $1,000, you know, is that going to be, where is that going to be recorded and maintained as a record for that money spent? still gonna balance out at the end of the year. So,
Well, I can speak to that. We now have the software in place that we didn't have before. We have the employees and the department heads in place. So, and this is coming mostly from, not from your department heads, it's not, but from staff who has to work so diligently and harder to come up with these purchase orders where, and the main issue was not having a BARS code on them because a lot of people didn't know what the BARS codes were, and now we have staff trained that way, and I'm giving reports to the department heads each month, and each payable period we're going over all the payables as well as the committee, finance committee. We also have this going on with the staff that meets with the mayor, and so they are keeping track of this every month, not like it used to be whenever they could figure it out. Now it's really a lot, it's controlled much tighter, so that having $100 limit on that kind of restricts when somebody has to go out and get something and they don't have a PO. We don't want to do a PO after the fact. I think I've heard from some council members that was going on quite a bit in the past. That's not what POs are for. And so, and I understand what you're saying, Councilmember Tiger, but there was a time when we needed to have this control because it wasn't being exercised in operations, but now it is. So, and you know, if that number's too high, maybe we can come to somewhere in between, but it does save a lot of staff time when we don't have to go for $100 on each PO.
And I thought in finance committee, I thought we talked about this and decided that 500.
Well, that was what you guys wanted to, I mean, I think you and Councilor Cave said that would be more comfortable for you guys, so.
Right. That was discussed at finance, because we had the same concerns. Because I remember, finance committee at the time, sitting through these and looking at half of the table, there was POs either after the fact or non-existent, so.
Don't forget POs from the same signature.
Yeah. Or the person requesting it signed the PO.
Yeah.
well, you could never tie in, you look at the payable and tie into, well, what department was it spent, or where was it spent? Oh, I don't know, what's the PO say? Oh, we don't have a PO. I mean, it was no control, it was just, go get it, put it in the truck, okay, well, we didn't need it, well, it wasn't returned, everything else, it was thrown on the shelf out there, never used, throughout the utility shop, they had all kinds of stuff that was bought, never used, and we can't tie in, and it wasn't returned. It's no different from me doing a project at my house. I go and get some parts and everything else, but if I don't need all the parts, I take them back. Well, here they go and they run and they buy parts, and they don't need them, they throw them on the shelf, and there's parts that are probably never going to be used for anything else again. And we had hundreds of dollars worth of stuff out there. It was mainly in the utility shop. And we have to have better controls on that. And Lance is not going to have control of it because he's in an office here doing all kinds of other stuff. He's got to rely on his people out there. But his people out there, they're pretty lax, right?
Does council have a recommendation as to what they'd like to see this?
I think the dollar figure needs to be lowered, and I still see tying it into the PO, even if it's an after-the-fact PO. So at least we know, and if it wasn't used on a project, we can police it and make sure the stuff gets returned. We should have a return bin out there, because stuff is ordered and comes in, and it's not right, other things, well, it just lays out there.
Point of information. I very much agree with Councilmember Steiger in the sense that none of us want to see material acquired that we don't have a use for. My personal philosophy, that's just money that if it's sitting on the shelf, we shouldn't have it sitting on the shelf. I would like to return those items, and I feel that I am already have made a difference where the procurement of material, I'm very comfortable that I have a good handle on what is being spent and what is being purchased by the department. The individuals who make procurement, they are getting clearance from me before it is being acquired. Now, I do recognize very strongly that it is a trust issue, and I want to earn your trust. And if a lower dollar of value would do that, I would be very comfortable with the $500 limit in order to earn your trust And then if we've proved it, then come back and recommend a different level.
What's council for that? Councilman Jones?
I'm good with that, the $500 rate, you know, when you're talking up to 500, being able to, the employees know they need to get some work, they're gonna go out and buy the product that they need, but they are gonna inform you, you know, they're not necessarily giving you approval, but they're gonna inform you what they're buying.
Absolutely.
You know,
a load of gravel could be $300.
Right. So, I'm good with that level, but again, I really want us to make sure that we have the controls and, you know, like you said, the trust issue, because as you can tell, there's a lot of mistrust because of past experiences with this, and I don't agree with having a PO after the fact for any purpose. You know, I'd rather have, if you got budgetary issues, within your budget, $500, they got to get their gravel, they go get it, they're going to come in and document with you that they've spent that money, here's the receipts for it, what it was spent by. If it's over $500, they're going to get their approval in advance. Again, it's documented, it's controlled, and at the end, we got the pluses and the minuses to identify where that money went. And I don't want anything, you know, signed by anybody giving themselves the authority to do anything, and then just make sure we got good coverage over it.
What's the council's thoughts on $500? Other questions or comments around the addition of the other numbers on this?
Well, I agree, we have to sit down and study them a little bit more than looking at them at this point right now. People don't see anything on the line.
So you're asking for a motion next week with additional questions?
Correct.
Okay. Any objection? Okay.
Well, just one question I did have. Signing authority for change orders and contract amendments, not without signing the actual wording. I assume you're also authorized to sign ones that reduce cost?
Yes. And I know this is...
They do happen occasionally.
Yes, they do. And we like those. One point that maybe will come up at another meeting, but I'll just mention very quickly because it's germane here, is that when we build the project budget to begin with, this is an area that I think I will look to make sure we do a better job and maybe make a contingency a part of the overall project budget. So then if underground utility work, as everybody knows, you could hit a pocket of petroleum product and that's a change condition. So we need to think forward so we don't slow our contractors down and we can just work more efficiency. But that will be another topic for another night.
We'll talk about this again next week.
And I will make the change for the $500.
Thank you.